G-Wolves has been around in our scene for quite a while. They began in 2018 creating insanely creaky and horrible mice, but now in the year of 2025, they're pretty much only creating products that I can actually recommend buying. There's pretty much no mouse brand out there doing this much innovation and really trying to push the boundaries of how low we can push the weight of gaming mice while still remaining insanely sturdy. But today you're gonna find out if either the HDM Plus is the perfect big hand mouse for you, or if this is genuinely the best iteration of the HDX that we've ever seen. But before we get into any of that, I do want to mention that these mice were sent out to me. However, that will not affect my opinion whatsoever. I also do want to mention that you should definitely hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in mouse reviews, or if you want to hear my opinion on the Wooting 60H EV2, which is going to come up very soon. Getting into the unboxing experience, you don't only get your mouse box inside of the cardboard, you also get an arm sleeve, some stupid air drying clay, and all types of trash that will probably just end in a landfill. And if you're wondering why RAM is so expensive, here's your answer. Inside of the box you also get some grips. They're actually pretty decent. They don't hold up too well over time, but they are decently grippy, but not too thin. You also get a carrying case. You get extra adhesion pads for putting them underneath the dot skates, but I've never seen anyone use those. You also get some stickers for underneath the mouse if you hate your mice collecting dust over the years. You also get extra skates, and we'll talk more about these later. And then you just get some random stuff like battery adhesives and smelly packets, and yeah. Coming from a company that calls coatings a health hazard and also an environmental hazard, all of this packaging stuff just seems very hypocritical. I will say that the carrying case is pretty cool, and that has also become a standard with keyboards, especially premium ones and custom builds these days. But you also get some carrying straps for the carrying case. You get 2 USB-A to USB-C wires for absolutely no reason. In theory, this one is for charging your mouse, and it might also do fast charging, I don't even know. And then you have this data cable as well that is very stiff and definitely made for 8K polling. And with these mice, you also do get a 8K receiver that doesn't match the color at all. And that's pretty much it. My recommendation here for G-Wolves is definitely to knock down the price around $10 and just get rid of all of this hot garbage. I do appreciate the grip tape, especially because these mice have no coating, but you really only need one good USB-A to USB-C wire. The carrying case is pretty over the top, although I do like the concept. And the air drying clay, the arm sleeve that always comes with the mouse, the tons of extra skates, stickers, adhesive pads, smelly packets, all that type of stuff, 99% of all people are just going to throw out. Either that or they're going to have it collect dust forever. Getting into the build quality, I am super happy to report that I have barely anything that I would even consider being an issue. The internal design is absolutely incredible, and the reinforcement here on the side walls is super solid, especially with the PCB in mind. I can absolutely stubby squeeze these mice and nothing happens. I will say that I would not recommend pressing on the top of the hump because the plastic is a bit on the thinner side, and if you put a lot of pressure into it, you can crack it. But compared to the VUK, these top shells have actually been reinforced here in the top, as you can see. And the absolute only teeny tiny complaint I have is that sometimes when I pick up my HDX Ultra after not having used it a day or two, I can press in this shell and touch the side button structure, and it does a teeny tiny micro creak for a bit, and that just settles in within a few seconds. It is nothing I can feel in game, and it hasn't been annoying me at all. I just wanted to mention it because it is not absolutely perfect. But in terms of button tolerances, switch grinding, side to side movement, there's pretty much nothing to mention. If you click the buttons towards the very end, there is a tiny bit of post travel, but it's actually designed pretty well considering that these mouse buttons go down this far. But overall, considering their weight, these mice are built very well. Talking about weight, the HDX Ultra in the configuration that I have it here comes in at 33.6 grams. With dot skates, you can get this down to around 32 grams. And the long HDM Plus comes in at around 35 grams. Because the version that I have here actually includes insanely thick skates, and your mouse will not look like this. And don't worry, I'll talk more about these thick skates later, although you'll never be able to see this in person. In terms of shape and comparisons, I don't want to talk about the HDX too much, because this is a shape that has existed for quite a while. As you can see, the overall size is kind of similar to an X2 Mini, but it is a lot more curvy. It has quite a lot of taper towards the front. It is also a rather flat shape. It is not rear humped, it is definitely a center hump mouse. And the low button height makes this even more enjoyable. Me personally, I use a 19 by 10 centimeter aggressive and pincer claw grip hybrid. If I were to only pull off an aggressive claw grip with no pincer contact, I can still recommend it for 19 by 10 centimeter hands, but I wouldn't really go for it if your hands are longer than 19 centimeters. I will say that in terms of a conventional mouse shape, this is super good for a fingertip grip, especially because you have this curvature where you can rest your pinky upon. And I know a lot of people who play fingertip who love this shape. And at around 33 grams, this is super enjoyable to use. For my pincer claw grip, where I have a lot of contact over here on the right side, because of this rear side that flares out here towards the bottom, you can get a lot of support and it just feels incredibly nice to pincer claw grip. I would not recommend anyone with a palm grip to buy this mouse. And if you do a relaxed claw grip, I would only recommend it for 19 by 10 centimeters or shorter. This is definitely more of a small mouse, and please keep that in mind. And if you want to know more about this shape, definitely check out some reviews from other people here on YouTube. Getting into the more interesting mouse, this is the HDM Plus. This is not to be confused with the original HDM from G-Wolf's, because this shape is very different. Whilst the original HDM was a clone of the G Pro Wireless back then, you can see that the HDM Plus is a lot longer. It is also still very flat towards the front and not too wide. The rear hump actually feels sort of similar to the GPX, and both of these mice are also in theory center humped, but as you can see here on the HDM Plus, towards the rear it does slope down quite a bit. It does have a bit of a butt and it doesn't feel too flat. So if you play either a palm grip or any sort of claw grip, you do get this hump towards the rear that provides you enough support for it to feel comfortable to use. You can also definitely pull off a pincer claw grip with it, but here's the catch. This thing is absolutely made for 21 centimeter hands and longer. This mouse is insanely long. With my 19 by 10 centimeter hands, when I grip it, my fingers are so far away from the front, and because of that, I end up here towards the rear, where I'm pretty far away from the mouse pad. For me personally, it does not feel comfortable to play. I feel pretty uncomfortable playing it, and it just feels almost alien-like because this mouse is so long. So if you play any sort of grip, no matter if you play a fingertip, claw grip, even aggressive or relaxed, or a pincer grip with this hump here towards the rear, I can absolutely recommend it for 21 centimeters and above. But if your hands are 19 by 10 or shorter, I would not recommend buying this just because it is a very unsafe purchase. There is a chance of you being able to use it very comfortably, as some people might say down in the comments as well. But I personally wouldn't recommend you going out there and buying it because it is a very, very long mouse. But as some feedback here for G-Wolf's, honestly, the shape is really good. The button height is super low towards the front. The hump is aggressive enough for it to have a lot of support for a claw grip. It is also center humped and goes up pretty far, pretty early, so that you also have enough support here for a palm grip. And as you can see, the hump towards the rear is very round. And overall, it doesn't feel obtrusive or unmaneuverable. I'm very happy to see unique shapes, and I'm very happy to see G-Wolf's doing mice that aren't made for just a fingertip grip. But since that's just the shape and not the actual feel of the mouse itself in your hand, let's talk about coating and dimples. First of all, these mice do not have a coating. This is just raw plastic. You're absolutely raw dogging these mice. You have some dimples and they are not as obtrusive as on the VUK. However, I did put some grips on the right sides of my mice just to make them a bit more maneuverable in-game because I felt like I was putting too much pressure onto the mouse in order to grip it comfortably. And I can definitely recommend doing that too if you get any of these mice. But yeah, dimples are definitely not for everyone. They can get pretty annoying. You can find yourself in-game wondering where you should put your fingers, and you pretty much want to find a dimple where you can put your finger on top upon and just stay there, but that doesn't always work. I'm very happy to say that the upcoming G-Wolf's mouse called the Lycan will no longer have dimples. And since the HDS Plus was one of the most beloved mice of all time back then, and it also didn't have any dimples, I think that this is gonna be the way to go in the future. Me, personally, I do not mind the dimples here on the HDX Ultra, especially after I've put the grips here on the right side. They don't obtrude me in game and I don't really think about them, but I would still highly prefer for it not to have any. In terms of skates, G-Wolf's is still using these solid white skates that are a bit on the slower side. However, the rounding is pretty decent and I have not had any type of issues on my firmer pads, but I would not recommend using these on an X-Soft pad at all. These mice actually come with dot skates installed, so if you're on a glass pad, those actually are pretty decent. But if you're on cloth pad, definitely use the bigger skates that they include inside of the box. For the HDM Plus, I actually got this model with super thick 1.8mm skates. This was kind of a mistake, but also an experiment from Jimbo from G-Wolves. What this results in is that you have a lot of surface area even around the corners of the skates, so even on my softest pads that I have, I cannot touch the base of the mouse on top of that mouse pad, and that actually worked really well, surprisingly. I thought that these skates were gonna feel like absolute ass, but since the liftoff distance was calibrated correctly according to these skates, it actually felt really nice to play with. I still definitely prefer my translucent type of PTFE skates, because the overall experience just feels a bit smoother and also faster, but these skates are not that bad, especially if you play on more of a mid or a firm pad. But yeah, for the HDM Plus, you will not receive these super thick skates. You're just going to get normal skates similar to the HDX Ultra over here. And for most people, these are fine unless you play really soft pads. In terms of the buttons, these custom Huano SPDT switches that they have feel so good. They are probably my favorite switch of all time right now. The implementation is so crisp. It is not too tactile, it is not too heavy, and it is still spammable. And it just feels so satisfying to use. Especially over on the HDM Plus, the implementation is just incredibly crisp with almost no pre-travel. I will say that the HDX Ultra does have a bit of post-travel, which is noticeable, which is very known for Huano switches because they just generally have more post-travel than other switches. But in terms of any switch grinding or button wobble, there is almost none. Especially the HDM Plus feels insanely solid. I cannot move the buttons from side to side. And over on the HDX Ultra, I can move them a tiny bit just because they protrude from the shell here towards the front, but they feel absolutely fine. The side buttons are also very spammable. You can't press them into the shell and they're really good. And the scroll click is a tiny bit heavy, but it is pretty much fine even for games like Fortnite, except for on the HDM Plus where it is a bit heavier. The scroll is very spammable, pretty light, not too heavy, and these steps aren't too defined. I would actually prefer these steps being a bit more defined. And as always, here's a sound test. In terms of the sensor position, these mice have it insanely far up. I think that a lot of people in the aiming and the enthusiast community like this a lot, but if you're not as serious of a gamer and you don't care that much, I do think that this will feel very sensitive in terms of wrist aiming. I personally really like the sensor position over on the HDX Ultra. The way that I grip it with my 19 by 10 centimeter hands, you can see that the sensor position is still above my thumb, but in game it has felt very natural to me. It definitely felt a bit faster than most sensors because they pretty much align with your thumb here towards the center of the mouse. But if you've always wanted to try a forward sensor position, I can definitely recommend these. If you don't know about sensor position and how much it affects the way that you aim, definitely make sure to check out the link down in the description. In terms of battery life, these are pretty bad. I have now died twice in game just because my mouse just died. I didn't even know that it was dying and running out of power because the LED is actually here underneath the mouse and you cannot see it if it's on top of your mouse pad. So I would definitely recommend G-Wolves to do an LED here towards the front or somewhere else where you can actually see it in game if you're about to die. It will also be dope to have an LED indicator on the receiver to see the battery status. But yeah, battery life really isn't too good on these mice. They have lasted me around 2 to 3 days on 2 to 4K. And I've already had to charge my HDX Ultra quite a few times. For the WebDriver, you can find it over at mouse.xyz. When you start up for the first time, you're not going to have this DIY setting turned on. If you want the lowest debounce time, just set it to A. Or if you are an enthusiast and really care about your settings, you can do before press, for release, and even after press and release settings here. I personally would just recommend you to turn it to the lowest setting. But if you're really schizo, you can set the before press to 0 milliseconds. Before you do anything though, I would recommend downloading the firmware and upgrading it first. You do need to do it with an executable, but that way you're just sure that it actually works. I also would recommend turning on the competitive mode afterwards. You have your DPI stages here. I just set it to one stage and put it to 1600, and you can also do DPI split. There's also sensor rotation up here. The liftoff distance is only for low, middle, and high. I would really love to see GWOS doing 0.1mm steps, since that is just becoming the new standard these days. You can also set your polling rate from 125Hz all the way up to 8K, and you can also turn on the SPDT state for the left and right clicks. If you don't know what SPDT is, think of rapid trigger like Hall effect keyboards but for your mouse switches. As soon as the mouse switch releases from the top contact plate, it instantly clicks, which just makes your reaction time in game quite a bit faster. I think that going forward, this is going to become the new golden standard for esports mice. I personally have it only set to my left mouse button because when I have it on my right click, I accidentally scope my weapons a bit too often, and that is already it for the software. Before I get into the conclusion, I also want to talk about the upcoming Lycan. It kind of resembles a Sora towards the rear, but we don't yet know exactly what this mouse is going to be like. It's going to come in at around 27 grand, and I'm really looking forward to testing this mouse out because it's not going to have any types of dimples. And right now, there is a blind buy going on for it for around $89, but you can also use discount code JKU to get it down to $79. If this is something you're interested in, I would definitely recommend checking this out because it's super affordable considering it's a GWOS mouse and it's also around 26 grams, which is kind of insane. But since this is pretty much a gamble, you need to decide yourself if this is something worth checking out for you. I just wanted to recommend it to you right now because it might be a really decent mouse, and once it's gonna come out, it's gonna cost around $139 to $149. But yeah, getting into the conclusion, I do want to quickly touch upon pricing on GWOS mice because they are rather expensive. I do think it's fair because they are doing a shit ton of R&D, and they're pretty much the most innovative brand out there right now in terms of lightweight gaming mice. I will definitely yet again say that dimples are not for everyone, and I really wish they just had a smooth outer shell with no dimples and also a coating. But do also keep in mind that you can use discount code JKU for any of their mice to save $10. They also have some different types of colors like this frost blue one, which looks pretty dope. And then there's also the amethyst colorway, which is purple. The HDX Ultra only comes in black and white and it costs a bit less. With the discount code, you can get it for $129 US, which I think is really fair considering all this R&D and innovation and engineering that is going on with these mice. I will say that these mice are not safe purchases. I don't know how you're going to cope with the dimples. I don't know how you're going to cope with having no coating. Me personally, I'm fine with it over here on the HDX Ultra with the grips on the right side. But for a mouse like the VOG that I've already reviewed as well, I personally cannot main this just because the dimples are so big and I cannot pick one that feels comfortable to use in-game. With the HDX Ultra and the dimples being a lot smaller, it's a lot easier for me personally to find a dimple that feels good. I just really wish these mice just didn't have dimples. As a final recommendation between these two mice, I will say that if your hands are 21 centimeters or longer and you just really want a long mouse and even the G-Preg Superlight isn't big enough for you, I can definitely recommend checking this one out if you have the budget for it. If you don't have a budget for this thing, definitely check out the ROM Leviathan V4, which I have a review up for up here in the top right corner. And if your hands are around 18 by 9 centimeters or smaller, or you simply play a fingertip grip, or even 19 by 10 centimeters with a pincer claw grip, I can absolutely recommend checking out the HDX Shape. And this thing with 33 grams in-game feels absolutely insane. As you can see on the screen, I'm absolutely fragging with this thing and it just feels absolutely effortless to use, especially together with the high sensor position that it comes with. And compared to 50 to 60 gram mice, this thing inside of Fortnite, which is a game that is very hectic and you need to do a lot of 360s all the time, it just feels effortless. Just please keep in mind, these are definitely more premium and expensive mice. And if you don't have the budget for it, definitely check out my other videos down in the description below for my top budget picks of this year. You can also find it up here in the top right corner. And if you're at all interested in any type of peripheral reviews, including the Wooting 60H EV2, definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it. But that's about it for this video. Thanks again, GWOS, for sending these mice out. I'm really hyped to check out the Lycan, and I cannot wait to get a GWOS mouse that no longer has dimples. But yeah, I'll see you guys pretty soon. Peace out.